happened to be New Year's Eve. Mr. Mack was at work, sitting in his office, very late, and the phone rang.
This was December 31st, 1942. The caller was Rear Admiral Sidney Moses Krause.
The Admiral was a little surprised that anybody even answered the phone. He was very much impressed that Mr. Mack, the president of the corporation, answered the phone.
Admiral Krause was an early naval advocate for jet-powered flight.
The Navy decided that they might want to set out a bid for companies to build a carrier-based jet airplane. And Mr. Mack said, "Oh, absolutely, we would like to participate." And I believe it was the very next day he flew up to Washington.
The phone call was a turning point for McDonnell Aircraft and for naval aviation. The Navy was a service in the midst of change. Just months after Pearl Harbor, planes launched from American aircraft carriers near the small Pacific island of Midway destroyed a Japanese fleet. The Battle of Midway demonstrated that the marriage of the carrier and the airplane was changing the way the Navy waged war. But this transformation was happening at the very same time that the jet engine was revolutionizing aviation itself. The Nazis had built the first jet fighter, the HE-178, followed by British and American prototypes. All of these jets offered the promise of speed.
There's an old fighter pilot statement that speed is life, and of course what the fighter jet gave you was the ability to fly at very, very high speeds.
Those charged with charting the Navy's future, like Admiral Krause, could see the inevitable. Jets would one day replace prop planes.
The Navy knew that it had to put jet fighters on its carriers because that was the way of the future, but they didn't know how to get jets onto an aircraft carrier.
The problem for the Navy was the nature of the jet engine itself. Piston engines deliver power rapidly, hit the throttle, and the plane instantly accelerates. Early jet engines took much longer to accelerate, so they needed a very long runway to get off the ground. But Navy aircraft carriers were short runways, very short runways, and they were in a constant state of motion. As challenging as those runways were for takeoffs, they were even more challenging for landings.
On a carrier, you're shooting to hit a landing area that's about maybe 100 foot long. We had a lot of problems during World War II. Airplanes coming in and not being able to stop, destroying a lot of airplanes, causing a lot of damage.
Naval aviation was already dangerous. Jets would make it even more so.
There were individuals at the Bureau of Aeronautics who did not think jets could ever be made to be compatible on aircraft carriers.
This is the problem that the Navy put before James McDonnell and his engineers.
McDonnell came up with a two-engine airplane. All the other fighters that the Navy was looking at were all single-engine. People thought that was the simplest way to build a jet airplane.
For a Navy that was waging aerial battles over the vast Pacific Ocean, two engines were appealing, especially for unproven jets. If one failed, the aircraft could still return to the carrier.
So McDonnell pretty much set the Navy's thinking that they actually always prefer a two-engine airplane if they can get it.
The Navy designated the new plane the XFD-1.
What's really the most beautiful aspect of it is the wing, how it blends in with the engines. And that's something that was definitely borrowed from the XP-67s.
But the XP-67 had been designed for land, and carrier aviation demands aircraft built to withstand far more stress.
Not only is it the force of the landing that puts stress on the aircraft fuselage, it's also the force of the hydraulic catapult dragging this aircraft literally down a short track and slinging it into the air from a standstill.
Only 2 years after the Admiral's New Year's Eve call to James McDonnell, the first XFD-1 prototype rolled out onto the tarmac.
It still astounds me that a man and his company can come in with no background in carrier aviation, build an airplane with that new kind of technology in such a short period of time and make it work.